All right, what's going on, guys? I am here for on ACL graduate interview number 9 with Pranay RANDAD. I'm going to invite him here and get on now. We are here today to talk about who, a few all ACL graduates who we've helped avoid the development of scar tissue. Pranay is going to hop on today to talk about his experience starting with us after he'd already developed scar tissue, how we helped him in deciding when to have that scar tissue removal surgery, and get prepared for it, and then how we also helped him overcome it. And a lot of times people have second surgeries, they get very nervous, very scared. Am I ever going to get back? Obviously, question with ACL surgeries is always, am I ever going to get back to what I was doing before? And can I come back stronger than before? When you have that second surgery, it's even more of a concern. Um, so this is an opportunity to hear from someone who did come back stronger than before after multiple surgeries. Gonna get him involved right now. Sure. Connect him. Um, Appreciate everyone joining. Just connecting with Pranay now. Or you're on a phone. All right. So for those who just joined us, um, Pranay Randad is going to be joining us to talk about his experience with us when he was struggling with scar tissue, and how he overcame it, returned back to soccer, came back stronger than before. We are getting him on here now. Ba, ba, ba. First, maybe easier. Mm, mm, mm. All right. Mm, right. Not seeing him here. Mm, Sorry for this technical difficulty. Oh, I've just invited Pranay. He should be joining shortly here. We have to make sure we can edit all this out in the beginning when we post it. Appreciate those of you who have joined, and I apologize for the wait. We're just getting Pranay on here, um, getting him set up. Mm, 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 mm. Mm. All right, so I'm going to start talking about Pranay's story a little bit. All right, we got Pranay in here. I see him commenting. Give me 1 minute. I'm going to invite you to join. All right. Mm, mm, mm. All right, so we got him on here. There we go, buddy.
All right,
How we
there we go.
doing?
Doing well now that we got Instagram up and running.
I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about
Yeah,
that.
it's all good. It's all good.
Not the first time we've had technical difficulties, but I believe I believe we had everyone waiting on the edge of their seat. So I appreciate it.
Great.
Super excited to go through this with you and excited to see you again. I hope all has been well on your end. I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction. I did so a little bit earlier, but I'm going to also let you then introduce yourself and give your background too, because I think you'll explain it even better. But yeah, so I talked about a last couple of all in ACL graduate interviews we've done with people who started with us, struggling with range of motion, concerned for scar tissue removal, having had that threatened by their surgeon. Talked about how your case is a little bit different. You started with us struggling with range of motion as well. When we first had our conversation, we talked about the possibility of that scar tissue already being developed and that being the most likely case. But with where you're
Yeah.
at, there was a lot of things we didn't want to get you to go right into surgery. And I think that's a common mistake people make of they think the scar tissue is the root cause of everything that's going on. And while scar tissue can create issues, very often it presents as a symptom that also can become its own problem. But background on Pranay is that his former Division One college soccer player, very high level athlete, had this injury, came back, felt like he was going to crush it, was able to kind of go through PT in a lot of ways, doing a lot of very impressive things, but developed the scar tissue, reached back out to us. And then obviously he's now back playing soccer, crushing it after a second surgery. So I'll let you give a little bit, just introduce yourself, a little bit background on, your history, your athletics, and then get right into your injury.
Sure. Sounds great. Yeah, thanks a lot, Tommy. And it's great to see you again also. I think it's almost been a year at this point. That's how good I've been doing. So yeah, basically, yeah, my name's Pranay. I've played soccer my whole life. It's been a big part of my life. Played at competitive levels in club, played in college as well, and really everything was great and I loved it. And I felt when I was in that sort of regimented environment of being on a team, everything was really taken care of. It was sort of later in my life where, I'm no longer, you know, on a team. I'm no longer on a schedule. I no longer have, the coach and all the resources around me. And I'm just doing soccer to stay within my community and keep my fitness up and doing what I love. So it was around when I turned 32 years old. So, I hadn't been playing competitively for some time. But I tore my ACL, and it wasn't, even competitive soccer when I did it. It was actually just a pickup game. But in general, yeah, what Tommy described there is my journey at a very high level. I tore my ACL at the age of 32. Um, sort of, I definitely knew something was wrong when it happened. But waited a couple weeks and then took my time and eventually got the imaging done, and for sure clean tear, full ACL tear all the way through, and really sort of went into the first surgery without much preparation. Didn't think too much, just kind of assumed a lot of people have been through this before. I'll be able to do it. It's no problem. The surgery is bread and butter these days. Um, and that proved to not be the case pretty quickly. Coming out after that surgery, I was doing PT. I wouldn't say I was on a program though, because it was kind of show up to PT and go through the motions, and sometimes the PT's even asking me what I want to do and how I was feeling. Wasn't really any objective testing or anything like that. Over time, I wasn't able to get my full range of motion back after that first surgery. Very clearly, there was some sort of physical block. That's what I felt. That's when I got connected with Tommy, because I wasn't ready to just give up on the process. I didn't want to jump into more invasive stuff without being careful about it, because it's your body, it's your human body. You got to live with it forever. So got connected with Tommy, and then you know Tommy was speaking a lot of truth. It made a lot of sense. Seemed to be really nailing a lot of like the symptoms and things that I was feeling, and suspected at the time that I probably have a Cyclops lesion. But I think what was important is we didn't jump right into that conclusion. We worked on it for a little bit. We focused a lot on load management and actually, I was able to get some wiggle room back working with you. Before that second surgery, but we did have to go in for the second surgery. That became clear because that full range of motion wasn't coming back. What was great about going into the second surgery is I was very prepared. I was very prepared because I was working with Tommy. Tommy had actually connected with my physician. They were chatting on the phone about what the best strategy was going to be. And so I basically had a team, and that was the difference between the first time and the second time is, I had a team and I was prepared and I was going into it knowing what to expect, but also knowing what my program was going to look like on the outset. And that second surgery, not to trivialize it, it's nothing like an ACL repair. It's an arthroscopic surgery. But it is a setback, and it is still important that you have a program and you've got your load management and you've got a coach facilitating that process with you, even after the Cyclops removal. Yeah, so I was able to continue working with Tommy, and I'm actually stronger than I was before I tore the ACL now. And now I'm running a lot. I'm back to playing soccer. My ankles are feeling great. They're not on fire all the time anymore. So yeah,
Talk,
that's a little bit of it.
yeah, talk a little bit about what your rehab looked like. And I know you hit on something that's really important, feeling like you didn't have a program,
Yeah.
right? But talk even more in depth about some of the things you're doing, because I think as an athlete, some of the things you were doing and in the time frame you're doing them, people might from the outside feel like you were really successful, right? I remember some of the things you were able to do in your rehab when we talked, and I was like, you're doing those things and don't have full extension. You're doing those things without a strength test. And I think a lot of times better athletes get pushed along and people get made to feel like athletes, like, good, I'm doing this. So
Totally.
talk a little bit about what you did.
Yeah.
And because I think a key point I want to touch on is scar tissue. While there's some level of scar tissue, we can't always control it. There's a lot of things we could do to put you in a position to succeed where you don't develop scar tissue. So it's not
Hmm.
totally out of our control. There's a lot we can do. I think looking back in your case, there's a lot of things that put you in the position where scar tissue was likely to develop or
Yeah.
possible to develop. And if we look back at how we can do that. So talk a little bit about what you were doing there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's a great reminder too, Tommy. So basically for my PT, after my first surgery, we jumped into PT and I was doing a lot of functional movement. Like there wasn't even any baseline strength building, the way that I did with you for a long time.
Mhm.
One of the things, and I'll give you one example very specifically, is I started doing uh, pushing and pulling. What is it? Prowler. Uh,
Oh, like sled pushes.
Sled pushes,
Hmm.
that's what it is. Yes. So early on, like literally within maybe 2 months after getting out of my ACL surgery, I was already pushing and pulling the sled because I was looking online and grabbing tips and things from whoever, and they were saying you got to get on the sled, you got to start sledding forward and backwards as soon as possible. Very clearly, I was not ready for that. I think now I understand working with you that was total load mismanagement. Like
Hmm.
that was just creating a lot of opportunity and a lot of friction for more like fibrous tissue to form. And so
Yeah.
that was one of the big things is in my first PT because there wasn't that gradual buildup, right? And there wasn't that objective testing. Now that I know with you, we did a lot of strength training. We built that foundational strength first, and then we went into the functional movements. It was kind of opposite. It was almost like we went right into the functional movements. And here's the thing, I was able to do it and the PTs were looking at me and they were like, "Oh, you look great." But actually I was just totally overcompensating with other areas of my body because I didn't actually have the strength. And when we did the objective strength test with you, which was the first thing we did,
Hmm.
we saw how weak my hamstring was. That there's no way I should have been progressing into those more functional movements, etc. But yeah, that was and that's a good reminder because
Yeah.
it's been a while now that I forgot about that's how I got started.
Yeah. And I think even thinking back too, I remember that from a sled pushing standpoint, but I'm pulling it up here. I remember even talking about because you were brace locked in extension for 2 weeks. You were
Mm,
non-weight bearing
yes.
for quite a bit a period of time too. And then we say, okay, great. What can you do? Right. And I think a lot of people view it as my PT is aggressive. That's a good thing. Right.
Hmm.
Or some people say my PT is cautious. That's a good thing. What we always say is there should be no, like it, it's kind of like politics, right? You don't have to blindly say, for this, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican. I'm not blindly aggressive. We're not blindly conservative, right?
Right.
There are certain areas that it's very safe to be aggressive, right? We talk about open chain knee extension being safe and there being a ton of research to support that, we're aggressive there, right? We start that early. We start that isolated loading early. But we're conservative in areas that it's important to be conservative, right? We're not going to say, hey, you are non-weight bearing. Let's ditch the crutches and start pushing you on a
Hmm.
sled. And that's, when I remember looking back at where you were, that progression off the crutches was very quick
Very quick.
because
Yep.
listen, Pranay lives in just outside Boston, right? And that's an urban environment. You got to walk to places. You want to ditch
Yeah.
those crutches. Everyone wants to. So you're not going to complain when your PT tells you, hey, you can get off the
Yeah.
crutches. But that lack of criteria to get you off crutches, there was no making sure, how much you're walking, how much you're walking with your full extension. And I looked back, and the other things we were doing was there was a lot of lunges that you were doing as well.
Yep.
And lunges are something I've got it here actually. You were on the elliptical, you were doing step ups with weight, we were doing single leg squats, we were doing step downs, the sled push and pull, Nordic hamstrings, all from a very functional standpoint.
Hmm.
But this all happened without any criteria or any progression to say, okay, we need to make sure you reestablish normal walking mechanics, normal hyperextension, build up the strength to keep that hyperextension, and then go into it. And I think from an outside perspective, people would feel you probably in the beginning felt like, great, I'm doing a lot of
Yeah.
things. They're treating me like an athlete, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. And I always it was always a bit peculiar to me, because there was never a program, right? It was always just at the sort of subjective thoughts of the PT, as to whether I was progressing or not. And really, the first time I actually got some objective data on it was when we did the testing with you.
Yeah. And that's a great point as well, and that's something I'll touch on too. So Pranay also starts biotech companies. So
Yes.
obviously very scientific, very engineering type brain, right? And a
Yes.
lot of the times the people that work with us at All in ACL will say things like, "I like a syllabus, I like a plan. I'm a
Mm.
type A person. I have an engineering brain. I want to understand how things work, right?" And very often people will feel like, "Well, what's the process here? What's the criteria? What's the systems we're going after?" And that is from the scientific perspective, right? But then people with a background in strength and conditioning, or people who've been a high level athlete that have worked with the strength and conditioning team before, right, as you said, being in college, will say, well, I know how strength and conditioning works, right? And say, okay, we're going to work these energy systems today, we're going to work this muscle group today, and this across the week. And that often strikes them as, well, just your HEP, your daily exercises that you just repeat and say, all right, let's do a little of that today, a little of this
Yeah.
today. I always say one exercise, one time doesn't have any value. It's about the program, right? And I think you nailed
Totally.
that in that perspective. Yeah, talk a little bit about how you felt with that. Even again, that might sound good to some people of like they were asking you, what do you feel like doing today,
Yeah.
right? But for you, it's like you're the expert or should be the expert that's taken me to the promised land.
That's
Talk a little bit about that.
that's exactly how I felt. Although I never vocalized that, it's exactly what I thought in my brain. I always thought like, well, you should be telling me what we should be working on today.
Yeah.
That's it's very much what it looked like, Tommy, what you described. It was, some papers, literally physical papers that they gave me, which had a bunch of exercises on them. And then after that, it was a free for all. It
Yeah.
was, and then it was me going back to my college days and thinking, okay, I know this, I know this, I know
Hmm.
this. I can put these together in a workout. I wasn't thinking at all about progression. starting with one, set of exercises or strength building first, and then progressing into, more functional movements later. Wasn't thinking about that kind of chronology of things.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking at all about load management. So I wasn't, what I was thinking was, okay, there are certain strengths or weights that I know I should be able to hit. And so
Mhm.
let me just try to get up to hitting those weights. Whereas that's really not what the process is more dynamic, right? It's an up and it's a
Mhm.
down, it's an up. Um, then, and so when you're sort of like left to your own devices, you just resort back largely to, at least for me, to what I knew. And there wasn't really much of a, there wasn't a method to what I was doing. The difference, like when I started working with you, is very clearly there was a method, there was a program, and there was consistency in that program. So once I got into the rhythm with your program, I always knew 2 days during the week we're going to be dedicated to strength training. 2 days during the week we're going to be dedicated to more, and I'm talking about later on in my recovery. 2 days dedicated to more, agility, forward, backwards, deceleration, that kind of movement. And so, one, not only did this create a chronology, right? I have to do this and become good at it in order to get to the next stage. But what it also did was it created a like habit, it created a schedule, and it created consistency that I was able to stick to, that I wasn't just free for all throwing some things together. What it used to be was on my way to the gym, I was deciding what I was going to do at the gym.
Yeah.
Now, what it turned into was a week before I already knew what I was going to be working on the next week. And then you can just commit to it, right? Then you can kind of turn the brain off and, okay, I shouldn't say turn the brain off, but you can commit to the program, and you can know that you're doing it in a way where you're actually accreting, strength, and where you're
Mhm.
actually, building towards those objectives that you need to get to.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And that, in a way, I know you say, hey, you don't want to say turn the brain off, but the decision making time is over, right? And because what
Exactly.
often
Yeah.
happens, and this is it, again, from an engineering standpoint, from a logic standpoint, it sounds so ridiculous, but it's very often done. And we talk to ACLers all the time who are being given this. You are given what you can do. So you often go in there and it's like, well, okay, you don't have full extension. So you can't, your quad's really weak. You can't do knee extensions. Let's do single leg squats. Let's do sled push because you can do those, right? And
Hmm.
what you are literally being trained to do is compensate. And that is the thing that we did when we talked through this is I always say, hey, it's going to be a bit of a mental grind because we're going to take where you're weak and then we're kind of going to rub your face in it because we're going to make you show up to work on those weaknesses over and over again. The good news is they're going to get better. The bad news is, in the meantime, you're not going to be too thrilled about. Like you're not going to feel good when you go to the gym because you're going to be like, shit, I'm really still weak, right? But
Yeah.
exposing those things is what's going to allow you to progress. And I think that's a great point of from what happened with you was you had the opportunity for scar tissue develop because
Hmm.
you were doing things that you couldn't do with you didn't have the quad strength to control and the quad strength to control and hyperextension. So for
Hmm.
those out there, we need to, if you have an ACL surgery, and I think this is critical in understanding, you want to come out of surgery and you want to reestablish passive hyperextension as quickly as possible. But then you need to build the quad strength to control that hyperextension. And then you need to manage the loads in a way that you can, until you have that strength, that keep you using that hyperextension.
Hmm.
And I think as a good athlete, talk about a little bit as an athlete how you felt like you were still able to do things and able to compensate prior to then getting the scar tissue removal. Like you were able to do some amazing things with that hard block stopping full extension.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, and it was actually a bit before the first surgery, but also a little bit even after the second surgery that I was compensating, and that's
Yeah.
why staying on the crutches for a long time was really important
Hmm.
to get that gait back. But yeah, I mean, for the I was quite surprised by how much I was able to still do. Um, by 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 overcompensating for it.
Yeah.
So like even emotions like um, squat like motions, step down like motions.
Hmm.
Um, what, I was able to move through them, and I was able to sort of go about my day-to-day activities, uh, even though I guess not knowing to myself that, I wasn't I wasn't getting back to normal. Like, my gait wasn't getting any better. My, strength wasn't actually getting much better because I was really just overcompensating with my left leg or my hip or something like that. One really good example for going downwards, like a step down, um, I didn't realize this until later, but it was all basically like my hip. I was just overcompensating and tilting my whole body to take a step down the stair. Um, I think that, yeah, it was really, I think, again, working with you, a lot of the videos, right, that we worked with and how you were actually able to very specifically point out how I was overcompensating, how my hip line wasn't flat. It was tilted and I was very clearly overcompensating. Going through that, getting that sort of real-time feedback, being able to iterate in real time and work towards those corrections. I mean, that was unbelievably helpful. It's sort of like, if you turn a ship just 1 degree now, right? You're going to end up in a totally different place. And that's all we did was we just made these sort of 1 degree sort of turns that amounted to this very significant improvement in the recovery process.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And that's so Pranay's story was basically started with us and we said, hey, you're having these issues, but there's a lot of, I told him in my heart of hearts, I believe you have a scar tissue development and I believe we should follow up with the surgeon to get this investigated. However, at the same time, there's a lot being mismanaged in your program that we want to get right before you were to go into a surgery. And it'll tell us, A, can we avoid the surgery, give you an opportunity to avoid it? And then B, it'll have you going in a good position. So in spite of all these things, as he said, he was single leg squatting, step downs, elliptical, but he was at under a 50% quad strength at limb symmetry. So
That's
quad
right.
strength 50%, not as strong as the other
Yeah.
side. So what we said was, let's get you as strong as possible. Let's put together a real plan to do that. Let's manage the loads in the meantime. Worked on untraining those compensations, got him back to 85% quad symmetry, but and made gains in extension, but weren't able to get the full range of motion we wanted. At that time, as he said, connected with a surgeon, decided to get that surgery, and then progress from there. Talk a little bit about from your perspective. You mentioned the video feedback, and I think
Mm.
that's always something that people want to hear about. Is I think a lot of one of the biggest hesitations people have about something online like this is, well, how are we going to check out my form? And then secondarily, you're struggling with range of motion, right? What about the manual part of
Mm.
that? As someone who not only stopped going to in-person PT, but also post-op, post-scar tissue removal that is specifically designed to get your range of motion, never went back to in-person PT. Talk a little bit about how this kind of, you know, were you surprised that you didn't feel like that this was able to work for you online? Talk about that
Mm.
experience.
This online digital experience was amazing. It's for me, it's in fact, I think one of the only ways I can have a really good recovery. Because the reality is you don't actually spend that much time with the PT. And the PT is sort of able to give you feedback within the 30 minutes that you have there, like in person with the PT, but they're not actually as intimately close and connected with your recovery and your program. Um, actually, as this digital experience is, this is a pretty intimate experience because you're basically daily, you're interacting daily. Um, so for me, this is more real time. You get more feedback. It's more like of an intimate relationship with your coach, and then the third thing is, sorry, the fourth thing, convenience. Like living in a major metropolitan city, it's just not that easy for me to physically get to PT. And and get there on time. That's the other thing. You only have 30 minutes with them or however long you have. And so this allowed me to do it anyway. Um, whether it was at the gym at my work or the gym in my building, or if I was out in the field, I could do it anywhere. And I knew I could get real time feedback, basically within a day or within the week, I could get feedback. Um, the videos are great. I think that's again, it's not the type of feedback you get from a PT, because the types of things you can do with the video are different. You can slow it down, you can pause it, you can draw things on it, you can really explain things quite nicely. So I thought it was super helpful. And then the last thing that you asked was about the in person. You know, did I feel like I was missing something because I wasn't getting that in person? Actually, like Tommy said, I ended up stopping going to the PT, because I found that it wasn't as effective. One of the things the PTs did was they did a lot of like cranking on my leg that was painful. Um, and again, I've seen things like this on YouTube, whatever, like pro athletes, they go through this. Um, Regardless, it was not pleasant. Like it just wasn't pleasant. And as I learned, more that maybe that isn't really necessary. Maybe you can take a more gradual approach to it with like the weight hanging on the knees, or I just I think over time I very much opted for the digital experience,
Yeah.
for the reasons I just explained, and because I trusted this more. I trusted that Tommy was up to date with my progress better. That he was actually looking at the notes he took from me the previous week. Because like a lot of times in the healthcare system, your notes get lost; they're not actually getting transferred to the next person. So for me, the digital experience was the best. It is, I think it is actually, it may be a necessary in for someone like me. I would look for a digital experience for my recovery process.
Yeah, that's such a great point that I literally couldn't have said that better myself. The way you said this is a more intimate experience.
Hmm.
I always say it allows us to get in the trenches with you.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. I always say, because someone like you, I think, and this has now really been a proven model, people like you, sharing their story. So we get these questions a lot less, but there are still people who find this and it's so new to them. It's so different. It's not physical, physical therapy. It's not in person, that it's surprising to them. But
Mm.
the way you explained it is so perfect, because what happens, I think, where people feel is that the session based model engenders this like, we have to fix it during this session,
Right.
and it's built around the exercises you're doing there, the manual your treatment you're getting there, what different codes are we billing, right? You can't bill all education, but you had the whole session, you had the whole week available to you, right? So they're trying to crank on your knee to say, we're going to gain you this range of motion, but it's not them that's going to gain you the range of motion. It's actually counterproductive, because you're going to leave in pain and you're going to tighten up the rest of your week.
Mm-hmm.
So you're like Humpty Dumpty, that everything's they're just putting you back together when you go back in there for those sessions. Um, and I would always say, I have been that person, right? It's not
Uh-huh.
just,
Yeah.
hey, what do we know about ACL injury, and obviously being experts in this, but you're in Boston, I'm in New York. I wouldn't want to see you in person for sessions. I couldn't provide you what we're able to provide you through sessions, because sessions are not designed for that. They're not designed to say,
Hmm.
I remember you had your wedding shortly after starting with us.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a weekend long event. How do we manage the loads underneath through that? Your
Yes.
program that week after your wedding is going to look a little bit different. We need to manage the loads on your knee, and I'd say these are your exercises: wash, rinse, repeat. Let's get you a session. You're swollen and painful. Let's get things calm down. We need to say, how are we going to manage the loads, and manage the loads for your life. And you really hit the nail on the head of like the systems we have set up allow us to say, we're going to manage these loads on your knee. We're not just going to say, okay, what does it look like? We're driving the bus when you're in front of us, and then you leave and you're kind of on your own.
Totally.
So I think that's a really, really great way to explain it, and something that I really think is important. We identified this when I first started on ACL. I remember thinking the people who get ACL injuries are 25 to 45, right? Like you said, you're in Boston, you're a busy guy. How do you fit these sessions in? And then on top
Hmm.
of it, what you need to do the rest of the session. And I always say it's not a knock on, there's some great PTs in Boston, right? It's not like you're in the middle of nowhere, right? But it's very hard for them to give you what you need in a busy, overworked, kind of burnt out clinic. And then it's very
Yep.
hard for you to get what you need in terms of, hey, how can you, while running this session, also map out my week and all the things I have going on with, work and weddings and weekend trips and all of that. And that's, really one of the reasons I believe not just in what we do in specializing this injury, but also in the model that we provide it through. I think allows us to give people more what they need, particularly when we're working multiple facets like range of motion and strength, and then walking mechanics, of course.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. I might y- summarize by saying that the whole digital experience, along with this, working with Tommy all in ACL, it turns the experience from a reactive experience to a proactive experience. And that's a total game changer.
Yeah. Yeah, great way to describe it. And I think the mapping out, talk a little bit, because I think from, now we've gotten to, okay, you had the second surgery and you start to touch on a little bit, but I think a lot of times in scar tissue being an issue that develops, people then describe as, okay, we're going to address the scar tissue and then you're going to be good, right? Where that, that's now you're going to be good, right? You're far out. Scar tissue was a problem. We addressed that. Versus for you, and I always use you an example of, you did come back stronger than before. You're playing soccer at full confidence, but it was another nine
Yeah,
months, maybe even a little bit longer from second surgery to fully
that's
back.
right.
We mapped out that plan. Talk a little bit about that progression and how that went, and what were some of the surprising things of it for you, and how you felt going through it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was not expecting that it was going to take that much time after the second surgery. I definitely fell into the camp of, and I know you and I had talked about it before, but still in my mind, I was like, no, but that's not me. I'm going to go
Yeah.
faster. um, but it again, I don't want to trivialize the surgery. It is an invasive thing, and it should be taken seriously. It's not as traumatic as the ACL reconstruction, but it does it's a setback. And it's not something you jump out of and you're just like doing what you want to again. It does. Now, what I will say is, for me specifically, when I got the Cyclops lesion removed, I had this anterior pain, and basically
Hmm.
immediately after the surgery, that was relieved.
Hmm.
The anterior pain was gone. So that was one thing that I noticed right away. So that was good, but
Yep.
that anterior pain was gone, but my extension wasn't back. So I still had to work very hard on getting that extension back. That was, doing stretches every morning, doing my the weights and the hanging, and at the beginning, it was no weight for a while.
Hmm.
We were using exercise bands to do hamstring curls, a lot of stretching, weights to try and get extension. And so, yeah, we did not jump into functional movements. We didn't even jump back into the gym. It was just it was more like resistance band kind of work.
Yeah.
And um, now, the other thing that's super important is the walking. Uh, the walking did not come back right away either. And I very quickly wanted to rush off of my crutches, and Tommy had to slow me down and put me back on them. Because that, and again, now knowing what I know, I can't emphasize that enough, because you want a good gait. You don't
Hmm.
want, that's such an obviously critical thing in everyday life, that if you don't fix that and really focus on fixing that early, it's going to just turn into some compensation issue later. And so we worked a lot on getting that gait back, and what that meant was uh good luck, Buff Barbie. I see that surgery tomorrow for you. Go for, yeah, you
Yes.
got the support of the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
we worked a lot on gait. So that was one that, like, for months. I stayed on the crutches for months after that second surgery. Um, and so that was one thing. The extension did come back, and that was progress that I was able to see. But still, it was a month or two. It was at least two
Yeah.
months after that second surgery. Um, w- so we did progress then into strength training. Um, and again, it was foundational first, just building up the strength. But then after that, we were able to get into squats. And that was literally I think that was the first time I did squats since 2022, when I had the initial injury. So, um, so then we were able to get into squats, and then a little bit after, and some short time after squats, we were able to incorporate some of the outdoor type stuff, the acceleration, the deceleration, the sprinting, the jumping, and jumping was really important. I
Yeah.
remember we did some
Yeah.
jumping before we actually got outside and did
Hmm.
sprinting. However, all of this is to say that it does take a while after that
Yeah.
second surgery. It is not just now it's not just a you're out of that second surgery and within weeks things just start clicking into place, and it is a little bit of a setback. I think I was weaker as well. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
After that second surgery I
Yeah.
was weaker and I had to build up that foundational strength, and
Yeah.
I think it took me 3 months to get back to symmetry
Yep.
with my right and my left.
Yeah.
um, and all I want to say is that don't be too discouraged by that, because it is the right path. You don't want to
Hmm.
rush through those initial phases after the Cyclops.
Hmm.
You want to take your time, do the load management. Again, it's my favorite thing now, load
Yes.
management.
Yeah.
And you want to follow that program and manage that load, because there's always risk of that scar tissue coming back
Yeah.
also. And so you want to really it's really important to manage that load and progress through at that slower rate. Stay on those crutches for a while, make sure you get that gait back before you jump back into it. You're going to be feeling a lot better.
Hmm.
So that's the other thing, is that's that psychological component, is you're going to want to go fast, because you don't feel the anterior pain maybe or something. For me, that's what it was. But you do have to slow yourself down. You have to sort of consciously slow yourself down, manage your load, and do it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple great points you hit on that I'm gonna kind of cycle back through. So, one of the things we see a lot of times, the opportunity for scar tissue to develop is from post ACL surgery, is from the two things you talk about: progressing off the crutches too quickly and getting too functional too quickly, where you don't maintain extension. This is shocking to people, and it makes sense now that you've heard Pranay's story. But so many people will then get the scar tissue removal, and the surgeon will say, "Great, we're removing that scar tissue. You're going to have full extension. There's nothing to protect. We didn't repair anything. You might use crutches that day, the next day, but then you can get off them." The problem that happens is, if you've not had extension this whole time, right? Now, in Pranay's case, he was lacking extension, but worked with us 3 months prior to scar tissue removal. We got him back to 85% quad strength, which is a very high number. But he had not been in full extension for now 8 months, 7, 8 months since his surgery. We had to rebuild that strength in that range specific area of saying, we need to get you to control your hyperextension again, because you haven't had it for a long time. That is where the crutches come in, where they're allowing you to walk at a percentage of your body weight, utilizing the extension that you've been lacking, that you don't have any strength in. And then you're also right that the surgery is minimally invasive, and a lot of times surgeons will focus on the minimal part, but the invasive part exists too, and it is invasive and it will knock your strength down, which is why we said, let's do 3 months of preparing you for surgery. So we don't want you going in with this massive quad deficit, because then you're just going to knock it down,
Yeah.
twice, and it's kind of like kicking you while you're down. So we built you up to here. The surgery knocked you down to here instead of knocking you all the way down to here, knocked you down to here, and then we rebuilt you
That's
back up. We used the
right.
crutches to walk normally. We got you on the leg press, and you were right
Mm.
that we didn't have you in the gym squatting, deadlifting, barbell training right away. But we got you back on the leg press, less than 2 weeks post op. We got you loading, isolating those muscles. And then you're right again that 3 months later, we were able to not only have you where you were pre op, but then exceeding that, being at about 100%, close to 100% quad strength. And then
Yeah.
that was when we moved into jumping. And as Pranay said, this takes time, because all of these stages of rehab that you have to go through, from basic strength to more functional strength and barbell and lunge training, to then jumping, to then running, cutting and pivoting, single and jumping, we still have to go through those levels to make you feel stronger. And that might feel like a lot of people would say, hey, I'm not going to be able to go through a whole 9 month rehab after my second surgery when I already, struggled doing the wrong things for
Mm.
6 months. But
Mm.
a lot of people will feel like, hey, they have to settle for my knee's never going to be
Mm.
the same.
Mm.
And I think that's where this took an uncommon route, which really is the right route, but to get you back to where you want to be and where you feel now, which is stronger than before, confident playing soccer. Um, Talk a little bit about that. Did you ever, when we put together the plan and you went through surgery and how long this was taking, did you ever have doubts of, am I ever going to get back? Or did you feel like, hey, I understand this plan. I know what I'm doing. If I meet this criteria, and you're getting things back of the way. Talk a little bit
Mm.
about both of those.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that before I met you, Tommy, I think I was very much concerned that I wasn't going to get a full functioning human body back. And yes, a big, consequence of that is no soccer, but then there's also so many more consequences of that, which is I just can't live a normal life. Um,
Yeah.
and after I met you, at the beginning, still definitely had reservations because I had this cyclops lesion, where I think that to I started to gain more confidence was immediately prior to my second surgery, where very clearly by sticking to this program, I was getting some wiggle room. And even though I was still 1 or 2 degrees shy. It was still very obvious that it was like night and day what I was doing before versus when I got onto the program, and it felt different. Also, it's like my body was responding different to it as well. Um, so there was that fear that I wasn't, but I think a lot of that fear came from just being on such an uncertain sort of path to recovery. Once we connected, there was so much more certainty in the path. There was a program. We knew that there were certain objective goals that we needed to hit, and as I hit those goals, I think you could probably track my level of confidence over time and see how they
Yeah.
track with me hitting those goals. It's like, yeah, I hit an inflection. My level of confidence went from 6 to 7 to 8 to 9, and then as I progressed past the second surgery into more everyday type of functional movement, etc. Um, my confidence was through the roof. I knew I was going to get back, and so that I think that having certainty, and by certainty I mean certainty in the plan, not necessarily the outcome, because I guess there's some aspect of that that you can't control. But having certainty in your plan and certainty in the objective goals that you need to hit, it makes the process psychologically so much easier. You're able to encourage yourself rather than constantly discouraging yourself because of the way your body feels, because you have data in front of you, you have a program in front of you. So for me, it was very important to actually get out of the psychological rut, um, by getting on a program and being consistent, forcing consistency with that program.
Yeah. No, that's such a great point. And I think that's so critical to understand that I think a lot of confidence has almost become a buzzword in ACL rehab. And we talk to so many people who say, I'm working on my confidence, and it's a confidence issue that they're
Mm.
dealing with. And what we always say is, if you don't understand the plan, how can you be confident? Confidence with a plan is understanding, but confidence without a plan is just faith, right? And a lot of people, the phrase that gets thrown around a lot in rehab and ACL recovery is trust the process, right? And I
Mm.
always say I hate to hear trust the process. An ACL are telling me, hey, I got to just trust the process. It's telling me their rehab is on a very bad path,
Mm.
because they're just saying, hey, this is, I'm just doing what my PT is telling me. If you don't understand the process and you can't explain it, and that's exactly what you said of like, hey, I'm not here to say I can promise you the world, right? You started with us. We said, hey, I think you have scar tissue. I think this is going to need a removal. But we could say, this is the criteria you're going to meet. This is how we're working towards it. When
Mm-hmm.
you meet that, you're going to feel a lot better. You're going to be ready to run. These are the processes you're going to go through to get you to where you want to be. We're going to evaluate every step of the way how you respond, but this is what you're working towards. When you understand that, it's much easier to be confident, because hey, we didn't just look at you one day and say, dude, you're ready to run, congrats.
Yeah.
We said, you're working towards 83% strength symmetry. You failed multiple tests, then you passed the test.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing this is the criteria I need to meet X, Y, and Z. I've known about this for a while. I finally met it. that gives you confidence, and then we can build up your confidence utilizing that strength, which I think is such an important point.
Totally.
um, Someone commented, and there was a response, so I wanted to stress. They said they missed the beginning. Did you have cyclops only or other scar tissue? They're 9 months out from third surgery after ACLR for arthrofibrosis and scar tissue starting to set in again. And that's a very important point that I want to address. So in Pranay's situation, it was a cyclops lesion. He did not have arthrofibrosis that was blocking flexion. Cyclops lesion is a scar tissue that is in the intercondylar knots that prevents extension. Um, but the principles are very much the same. And where it's important, what we've talked about a lot is scar tissue very much can come back. And the reasons that scar tissue develop are the reasons it does come back. And you'll see in the highlight at the top of our page where we have scar tissue stories, a number of people who started with us after multiple scar tissue removals or multiple manipulation of anesthesias
Hmm.
because they didn't have the loads managed afterward, just the way we're talking about here.
Hmm.
And that's really what's critical in what we've discussed is like the scar tissue being removed addresses the symptom often, not the root cause.
Hmm.
It's progressed in a way that it needs to be addressed, but it doesn't mean it cures all the problems. We need to then look at, the word you mentioned, which is load management, right? And I think addressing that, the load preparation as well as the load management, is what we did right. And I'm going to ask that person to send me a DM after this because we could talk more about your specific situation. Um, Tell me this, Pranay, if you had to give advice to ACLers going through
Hmm.
this. So, hey, I just tore my ACL, nothing about scar tissue, nothing's happened yet. What would be your biggest pieces of advice to them?
Get on a program and get on it early. That would be my biggest piece of advice. I think it is very easy to nowadays think that this is just a normal thing that many people have been through, and everybody comes out on the other side looking good. Um, I it's just it, I just don't believe it's true based on my experience. There's, probably we probably don't hear the negative stories often enough. So I would say, you know, as much of an athlete as you are, as knowledgeable as you are, as much as trust your surgeon, right? Because your surgeon's not even a part of your recovery. Get get on a program, ideally with a coach, as early as you can, even before going into your first surgery. Because the earlier you can get on a program, the earlier you can actually start making progress, incremental progress, and that's totally fine because it is a long journey, and you got to be ready for that long journey. But if you are on a program, if you're working with a coach like Tommy, then you have you just know that you're setting yourself up for the best probability of success as early as possible in the process. Um, and there's nothing wrong with reaching out for some extra help. The way that I think about it is like, this is my human body, and um, I'll be damned if this is the body I'm left with for the rest of my life. Like for me, for sure, I knew I wanted to get my fully functioning human body back, and that comes with preparation as early and planning as early as possible, and sticking to a program, hitting objective goals, being consistent with it. I can't emphasize it enough for the ACL recovery process.
Yeah. No, that was so beautifully said and so true. And I'll say that too. I think something you hit on that it's made to be this everyone succeeds. Everyone, it's no big deal, right? I do 100 of these a week, right? And surgically, the path is proven. ACL reconstruction works, right? But the things you said, we have the research to prove it that, and unfortunately the expectation, we call it the expectation gap
Mm.
of 88% of ACLers go into surgery expecting a return to sport at the same level. 55% do. That means 45% of ACLers have this surgery and never return to the same level.
Wow.
We also have stats like one third of ACLers suffer re-injury. 50% suffer a secondary injury like a meniscus. But we also know that criteria we've talked about, the right plan, the right program can reduce these numbers by 84%. So there's a lot of great data out there to do this right. And then I think in pop culture, everyone remembers Adrian Peterson and Tom Brady, and but they forget about Derrick Rose, and all the people who didn't have the same name,
Hmm.
and Odell Beckham. And I think that's a lot of what happens. Of it gets kind of pushed to the side where even people, I think start with exactly what you said of ACL surgery is a big deal. Coming back is not guaranteed. I need to do everything I can to set myself up for success. And exactly what you said about pre-ab, we know that your 2-year post-op outcome is dictated by how you go into surgery. 3 months of pre-ab make a tremendous difference on your post-op outcome. Unfortunately, in America, that is almost never the case because what we say is doctors see you say, "Hey, I got an OR slot, I can get you in next week." Other healthcare systems have their own flaws, but that is one thing that we see a lot of people saying they get in surgery without prehab. So if you have the opportunity to have this injury, and as people like you spread their message and kind of share this, and Christy, I saw your comment too saying you wish you would have started with us sooner too, and I so appreciate that. I think that has allowed more and more people to say, I had the surgery, what can I do? Pre-op makes a tremendous difference. The number one predictor of a scar tissue development is, did you go into surgery lacking range of motion?
Hmm.
So doing pre-ab to reestablish full range of motion, reestablish your strength, and then coming out of it with a plan is truly like that old saying of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, where if we could do this right from the beginning, it saves us time, effort, energy, expense, and the long-term outcomes, as you said, are what you want, what you can get. So you touched on it a little bit. I talked about it a little bit, but talk about kind of where you're at today, what you're doing, the results you've had. Do you feel the same? Do you feel better? How confident are you in the gym? How do you feel playing soccer? All of that.
Yeah, I feel great, Tommy. It's great to be chatting with you again because now I'm playing soccer every week. Um, it's about that fitness, but it's also about community. Now I'm back with my community. I feel like that part of my life is reignited also. So it's more than just the physical aspect of it. And I'm hiking again. I basically anything I want to do, I can say. Did I lose you there, Tommy? Did you catch all that?
I'm sorry, you cut out for 1 second. Oh, Pranay.
Yep.
I'm sorry, you gave a beautiful, heartfelt message that got cut off in the middle of it.
Yep.
Um, you were saying you are back with your community, you're back playing, and then you got cut out. I'm sorry. Can you repeat what you said?
Yes. So, I'm back playing soccer every week. It feels great. I'm back with my community, so there's that aspect of it too, that part of my life has reignited. Um, I feel very confident playing. I'm not really second guessing much. Now the one thing that is really important is I still stick with my strength training and I still do all my stretching and I still do all my preventative work. It's so important. I have to do it. Like psychologically, I have to do it so that I can be confident on the field. But the reality is that's something I should have been doing the whole time anyway. Um, so it feels great. The other great part about it is nowadays anything I want to do, I can just say yes to. And that's something you totally take for granted until you have an injury like this. For 2.5 years, I had to think twice about what I could actually do and participate in, and what I had to, come up with some alternative for, or, I had to think twice about. And now it's just great to be able to just say, yes, hey, we're going up to the mountains next week. Yep, I'm going to join. We're going to the beach. Yep, I'll be there. And so, my life's good, and I very much have gotten many aspects of my life back by getting my knee back.
I love to hear that, and I'm so happy. I'm so proud. I'm so appreciative of all the work you put in and all the time you spent with us. Um, I think you hit on a couple things that are really important of like, this is about saying yes to things, right? I always, in the PT world, medical world, we talk about your functional goals, right? And, what are those? And obviously soccer is a big one, but it's like that, like you said, that's your community, confidence doing
Hmm.
it, being able to do it for the long term. And two things I want to say too, that we always say when this injury happens, you were in your early 30s, now starting to push mid 30s. We always
Yeah.
say, to a lot of people who are active and soccer becomes their rehab or hiking becomes their or soccer becomes their fitness, running or hiking becomes their fitness.
Hmm.
We always say if you want to continue to play soccer, to hike, to ski at not just 32 but 42 and 52 and 62, strength training is the way to do that. Strength training is the fountain of youth.
Hmm.
And we always also say that you dedicated a ton of time to this. We don't want you feeling like you have to maintain that same amount for the rest of your
Hmm.
life. The bar for maintenance is much lower, right? So
Right.
I know you're
It is.
working hard in the gym, you're keeping up with strength training, but we always tell people it's 2 days a week, 5 to 8 exercises when you're done with
Yeah.
this. But you got to get to the place that Pranay's at now. So,
Totally.
um, last question. Christy commented and said, "Are you able to full out sprint with confidence? Do you have any fear when playing soccer?" Just want to let you address that.
So I think that there is still some fear, and but I would describe it as more psychological than physical. I think
You may for a second. Sorry, you said there is some fear, but you described it as more psychological.
yes, that's it. That's exactly it. So there
Yeah.
is still some fear, but I would say it's more psychological than it is physical. My body is really ready. Again, objectively, I'm stronger. I do a lot more stretching than I used to do. I do a lot more maintenance and just preventative strength training than I used to do. So my body 110% is ready. I would say where I still have reluctancy on the soccer field is more psychological. And I think that's a good thing though, because I think you can overcome that with just more, consistency, getting back to your sport, socializing in your sport, competing. I think you can get over those psychological barriers. But physically, yeah, I'm 110% there.
No, that's a great point. And I think that's exactly where what we say is anything you do, we need the criteria first is that brick foundation. And then that confidence we need to build on, right? And I think getting back to playing soccer, there should never be this, hey, you haven't jumped and now it's this huge spike in workload. But there's
Right.
lines of demarcation, right? Where the first time you jump is the first time you jump, even if you're ready. First time you run is the first time you run, even if you're ready. Same thing for playing soccer, and it's going to take time for you to get used to playing again, for you to get
Hmm.
confident in going in for contact, going the way you're injured. And I'd say probably even more than you could maybe attest to this. She asked about full on sprinting. Usually it's more the deceleration and the rapid change of directions,
Yes.
which I know you're doing now, but that's typically where the
Yes.
psychological piece plays a role. But maybe this will be helpful too. I think for Christy, who asked this, is do you see that improving each and every time you see yourself be successful in playing?
Oh yeah.
Do you feel like it's improving with each successful play?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think, Jed, just to echo what you were saying, I think the areas where I have reluctance, it's not in sprinting. It is in more in sort of very hard, sort of cutting, like lateral motions, which is very common in soccer. And the second area is uh, uh, it was just on the tip of my tongue. It was
These
cutting.
contact.
Contact. That's what it is. It's defense.
Mhm.
It's more tackling and contact. However, yes, the improvement uh, 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 week to week is yeah, noticeable. You will absolutely overcome those barriers.
Yeah.
Um, Especially if you're a little younger than me. So I yeah, I'm very confident that if the strength baseline is there, then the psychological barriers, it's just a matter of time, just more play. You just need more play and more familiarity with it again, and then you'll get over those psychological barriers.
Yeah. No, and that's a great way to describe it. And the thing we always say is that confidence is a scale, right? And I mean not a scale like the one you stand on, but a scale like the one with two sides to it, right? And your whole life, if you've been an athlete, you've been playing, you have a level of confidence that your knee's going to support you and when you cut and pivot. When you then have an ACL injury, especially a non-contact injury, it's a very heavy weight on this side of the scale that's going to pull down your confidence, right? And then this is the key, really. When you are progressed without strength testing, when you're progressed in a way that you're compensating, that is also bricks on that side of the scale because you're doing things that you're writing checks your quad can't cash, and
Mm.
that's weighing down your confidence. Then if we do this the right way, we get you strength tests. Each way that we push you through, you're 7% out of your comfort zone. And you're the first time you go to jump, you're a little scared, but then you do it successfully. You see yourself have success with it. You feel your knee support you, and your confidence grows a little bit. And then, same thing the first time you run, the first time you cut and pivot, the first time you decelerate, all of these things. And then the first time you go to play soccer, you're still a little bit nervous, but you see yourself be confident, you see yourself succeed with it. And then playing soccer is obviously a dynamic set of problems. So you're going and you're exposing yourself to different things in that
Mhm.
soccer, in that dynamic situation. So it's, how often are you cutting and pivoting? How often are you decelerating? Obviously a lot, but different scenarios on different surfaces with different footwear, you see your confidence grow as you do that. And I think that's, really important. And I think you're continuing to build on the confidence that you built with us. And I think that's going to continue to improve. So, I so appreciate you joining with me. I think you have such a great, understanding, such an awesome experience. I think it's so great to hear for people to hear what you've been able to achieve and what you've been able to get back to after two surgeries, the lessons you've learned. I am super appreciative to you. I appreciate you joining me. Keep staying in touch. Keep being a representative for all the ACLers out there who ended up with scar tissue removals. And I really appreciate you joining.
Likewise, Tommy. Appreciate you as well. And yeah, if anyone wants to reach out, please feel free to DM me.
Yeah. So appreciate you offering that. And I always say it surprised me how often people don't do that. I always say we're full transparency. When you see us share testimonials, reach out to the people we tagged in them when we do interviews like this. These are real people, right? They're real people who are just like you, had the same hesitations, that you may have had. So that's why we do these interviews. That's why we share those stories. So thanks so much, Pranay. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk soon.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Tommy. See ya.
All right. Bye now.